And you're listening to KMUZ Turner. I'm Dave Duncan. And today we are joined by local author of a new story called Double Take, young adult story. Please welcome Bobby Bowman. Hi, Bobby.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
So this is a very fresh release for you, isn't it?
Yes. I just opened the box about last week.
Do I understand you made a video of opening up the boxes?
Yes. It's something that I've seen on YouTube with other authors opening up, the first box of books they get,
The unboxing.
It's called an unboxing. And so I decided to do one, and I did it in sign language.
Really?
Yeah, so I signed the whole thing, and then I thought, oh my gosh, my hearing, people that I know that are hearing, they won't understand it. So I learned how to caption what I signed, and so it's captioned.
This book, it's set in Oregon.
Yes.
Can you give us a little pitch for Double Take?
Yes, it's a mystery where two women that are going to a community college, one is deaf and one is hearing, they're sisters, and they solve a mystery. Something happens at the college, and they solve it. So if you like mysteries, if you're interested in American Sign Language, if you're interested in signing, if you like females that are powerful and empowered and interesting, then I think you'll like the book.
Now, you categorize this as a young adult novel, so what does that mean?
The heroes are young people, but also there are things, I would say, in young adult books, what you don't see. You don't see a lot of swearing, a lot of violence, a lot of
It's pretty wholesome.
Sexual situations that you might see in other books.
And in this one, you have the two sisters. One is deaf.
Mm-hmm.
So what inspired that?
Well, two things. I wanted deaf people to be able to open a book and go, "That's me," and see themselves in a book. I don't see enough of that. As I would look at, at the time when I was teaching American Sign Language, I tried to read everything that was written that had deaf characters. And you'd either have someone that was like, pity me, or someone that was like magical, like she could lip read across a football field and da-da-da-da, these magical things that they could do. And so it's like people that are just everyday, wonderful people, you didn't see that in a book. And so I wanted to write that. Also, I taught sign language for a lot of years, American Sign Language, and I always wanted a book that was fun, that students would be able to learn something about deaf culture and American Sign Language and have fun doing it. I had books that had the signs in it. I had books that had grammar structure and all the things you needed to learn. But kind of like a peek into the deaf culture, I didn't have that.
I can't imagine an easy way to get into that short of having some sort of popular media of what is a culture. I mean, if you just describe it, that's not very compelling.
Right.
But you have a story in it. Boy, people really dig on stories.
If you think about a show that came out decade or so ago, Children of a Lesser God. It was a movie.
Yeah.
And that really did a lot in that people are saying, wow, I never thought about this, or I never thought about that, or I never, understood. It opens the door to kind of a new world, which I always think is a fabulous thing.
You mentioned that you put in many years as a sign language interpreter. So what drew you to that originally?
I've always been an educator. I've just, since I was preteen, I just knew, okay, I'm going to be a teacher. And I went to the University of Kansas, and I got my teaching degree. And the last semester being there, I remember sitting up on a hill. I was going to graduate, and I went, I don't want to teach kids. I don't know what I'm going to do. I had done great, and I liked kids, but it's like, no, I don't want to teach kids. I don't know. And so I moved to Oregon. I worked my way through some of my college as a waitress. So I got a job as a waitress. And then I got a job as a printer in Portland. This is years ago because we printed phone books. That's a treat, let me tell you.
Wow.
We printed phone books, yeah. But what I noticed is I'd get a job as a waitress, and then within a couple of months, I was put in a position of training other waitresses. Then I went to work to print phone books, and in a short time, it was up to me to train or teach how to run the printer, what do you do with this, what do you do with that, and I was just going, what is the world trying to teach me?
I can't get away from teaching.
A friend in Portland said to me, you talk with your hands a lot. You ought to take sign language. And he just said, it's kind of like that, hey, kid, you'd be a good sign language teacher. It was
something random.
It was so random. And I was like, I do talk with my hands a lot. I'm 23. I'm going, yeah, I'll take sign language class. So I went to PCC, Portland Community College, and I took a night sign language class. And that night, the very first class, sitting in that classroom, it changed my world. I just sat there and I went, this is what I'm going to do. In 2 years, I'm going to be a sign language interpreter. And I was. And then soon after that, I became a teacher. I can't not teach something, It just is a part of me. But I'm really happy about that. And I'm really proud of the time that I've spent with the deaf community. It's like I said, changed my life.
Well, let's educate a little bit now. What is the life of an interpreter?
The life of an interpreter is very interesting. And it depends on if you're freelance or if you're connected with a college or a school. I think there's a big difference there.
So one would be you're in the class and you're translating for the deaf students? Is that
yes.
That kind of thing?
Yes, that would be. And it's kind of steadier work where you're, maybe hired for 9 months at a time. I went right into a college. And it was OCE at the time. It's WU now.
Oh, okay.
And in Monmouth. And I was an interpreter there. And but also at the time, and we're talking about 30 years ago, we're talking a ways back. At the time, there were extracurricular kind of activities that interpreters were called upon. So you might be, so you would work for the college, but then sometimes they would say, you need to go here or you need to go there. I remember vividly one morning getting to work and then going to the dean, and the dean said, I got a job for you. Do you have a black dress? And it was like, okay, I need more information. And he sent me out to interpret at a funeral.
Wow.
And it was like, go back home, get a black dress, go to the address, and interpret at a funeral. So I've done weddings, I've done funerals, I've done not family gatherings, but things that are like that. Social events, dinners.
Now, is that the other side of the coin you're saying, where one was going to school?
That's the freelance. One is where, the freelance is where you go out. When I was training to be an interpreter, it was, dinosaurs were roaming. It was indeed.
What's changed?
So much has changed. At the time, I remember training in California at a community college, and there were two sisters there. They were of deaf parents, so hearing children of deaf parents. And they interpreted, and they were very suspicious of me
Interesting. Why?
because it was like, what's your angle? Like they go, we're interpreting because we have a connection. What's your connection to it? And I did not have one. I had to build my reputation,
Wow.
because they go, well, do you have deaf parent? No. Sibling? No. Children? No.
What's your story,
Yeah,
Bobby?
yeah.
What's your
why?
story?
And sincerely, those two sisters were like, we didn't know anyone would interpret that didn't have someone connected that was deaf. They just that was not something they thought about. And now it's a language. American Sign Language is now considered a language. At the time, it less so. Now it's really come into its own, I guess, is a way you could say that, American Sign Language. And how it's taught has changed since I was in the field over 30 years ago. They were still grappling with, is American Sign Language a real language?
Wow.
And so much of the teaching was English-based. There was even something that was called PSE, Pidgin Signed English. Pidgin, they used to call it, which was a combination of English finger spelling and structure and signs. They didn't even say American Sign Language. So that has really changed. Now there's clarity with there's English signs, meaning you're signing and you're in English order, or American Sign Language that does not have the same grammatical structure as English. So, oh my gosh, so much has changed. It's really been wonderful.
I mean, from the outside of this, I would hope that sign language would have a shot at being universal because, you're kind of starting from scratch.
Well, when you think about that, and you'd hope, wouldn't it be nice if American Sign Language was universal? But I feel that way about any language. But language is so strongly connected to our culture that, like, who's going to give up their culture and their language to, jump on board? Japanese Sign Language, Swedish Sign Language, Mexican Sign Language, it's all different. And so when you think of the iconicity of a sign, like sun, sometimes you don't really see that it's sun unless after you learn it. You go, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Ah, I see. So it's almost like survivor bias. It's like, okay, once you're in this language and see a sign, you're like, oh, of course that's that.
Yeah, of course that's that, because then you make up a little story in your head because you're learning that. But a baby, they don't know, oh, that's because of this and that, you know. That
They're saying, like, why are you wishing me to a good axe in the head?
Well, also, if you think of the sun and the way we perceive the daily trek across the sky, how that could be day, then somebody else could perceive that as different, but you could still go, oh, that's why you sign that for day. Or female. Oh, that's why you signed that for female. But it really comes down to the same thing with English language and the etymology.
That's true.
You go, oh, that's why you say that, because it came from German, a little bit of Latin. That's why you say this. But it's only afterwards. Little kids growing up, they don't know that.
Yeah, I've heard that language affects thinking to the degree that, the way you have future and current tenses different affects how much people save for retirement. Because the way the words we describe, it's like that's another person in the future.
Oh, that is so interesting. I've never heard that before.
In some languages, though, you kind of using more of a current tense. You speak about the future in the current time. I am a person with retirement,
Yeah. Interesting. Yes, I think how we view the world, and that's why I think if you know more about different languages, it just opens you up even more. Take a little bit of this language, a little bit of that language, and it expands your brain.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And now we discussed you have a teaching nature. How did you make that transition from interpreting to teaching?
It happened pretty fast. I must say, it always seems to happen to me pretty fast because I love to teach. Interpreting is a very different animal because you're not you. You're in the voice of both people that you're translating for. So you're in the middle. So what's coming out of your mouth is what the deaf person is signing because the hearing person doesn't know how to sign. And the things you sign are from the hearing person because the deaf person doesn't have that auditory connection. And so you're being two people all the time, and you're not yourself ever.
And it's not just the words you're signing, it's the way you're doing it, right? So
Oh, yeah. And if someone is mad, if someone is sad, if someone is angry or hysterical, either good hysterical or crazy hysterical, then your body doesn't know the difference. Your body doesn't know it's not you. You're signing that. You're being that. So I am those two people. In the classroom, I get to be myself. You know, I'm Bobby Bowman. I'm teaching a class, and I loved that. I love that.
you're listening to Willamette Wake Up. I'm Dave Duncan, and I'm speaking to Bobby Bowman, the author of the new novel Double Take, which is set in Oregon and featuring a pair of sisters, one who was hearing impaired. Was writing almost like teaching, where it just like came upon you suddenly?
Oh, no. No, no.
You didn't just say, hey, I think I'll write a book.
Writing has always been really hard for me, really hard. I've done a lot of academic writing. You kind of have to as a teacher. But I've never been playful with my writing. I've never tried my hand. I had never tried my hand at a mystery. It wasn't until I joined the Twitterverse and started hanging out with my tribe on Twitter, those that were in the writing community, that I just got a feel for like, oh, I can do some of this.
What did you learn from them?
Just this passion of writing and this support, and if I would get like a question or from my first tweet in this game that we called Friday Phrases, someone would just go like, good job, or I like that image. And I played it as a game. You know, there was no one was looking over my shoulder. No one was, critiquing other than to say, cool, come play. When I joined the group NaNoWriMo, which is the national novel writing, every November people get together all over the country, which is crazy. For me in 2015, it was the basement of the library in Salem. A whole bunch of NaNoWriMo people came together.
Wow.
And they had a kickoff, and they started in, and we would, report. You'd report in on how many words you did every day.
And so, what was the NaNoWriMo? What was the goal?
You write so many words every day, and by the end of November, you've written 50,000 words.
And it wasn't aimed specifically at writers, right? It was just everybody, who's had some bit of writing.
It was anybody that wanted to write a book. Anybody that wants to write a book.
It was just like, we'll throw down the gauntlet. Let's do it together. Let's do it at this pace.
Let's do it together. And nobody wrote any, like someone over here would be science fiction. Someone over here is writing a gardening book. Someone over here is writing history, because we didn't read to each other. All we did was we said, we're committing our energy this month. We're going to work really hard on a dream we have for a book.
And for you, it was, of course, you drew on your experience and your
Yes.
love of Nancy Drew, and
Yes.
you combined them all together, and you came up with the seed of.
I came up with the book I always wanted to write.
Now, why was it important why did you always want to write this book?
Well, because I think a way to learn things is to have fun with it. In my classrooms, I always had a lot of laughter. I always tried to mix in humor. I thought it was so important because I think that when you're laughing, you're opening yourself up. And so I thought that was so important that I wanted a book that, it's not funny, but when you're enjoying something, your brain is firing and you're learning things. And I love that.
Now, what were the kind of lessons you slipped in?
I like to incorporate things you wouldn't think about, like Aunt Wendy. I love Aunt Wendy. She's one of my characters. And, when she has her meals, sometimes she likes to talk about the good old days. And the good old days sometimes have to do with when she was at Gallaudet and some of the historical things that happened at the time.
Oh.
And so, and there are people at her table that some are deaf, some are hearing, some sign, some don't.
And so you get to see a slice of how you accommodate that.
Yes, and how in her own home, she brought in 2 interpreters for her meal.
Wow.
Because she wanted everybody to be comfortable at the table.
I suppose you see a story like this, and it's almost a blueprint for, how can I be comfortable interacting with this other culture within our culture. Oh, now that I understand it a little bit, it's not unfamiliar and foreign.
Right,
and, to be avoided.
exactly. Very well said. It's not unfamiliar and foreign. It's more like, oh yeah, of course. Like, yes.
So I hope people get a chance to exercise their curiosity.
Yeah, Double Take by Bobby Bowman on Amazon. And
Because there's a lot of titles that start with double take.
oh my gosh.
I tried that by itself. It was not a good experience.
Embarrassingly so.
Now, there was another aspect that was kind of interesting was again, your teacher side coming out, and you did like an FAQ that you snuck in here for 10 myths about.
Oh, yes. I put in the questions that were answered in the book. So I didn't put the answers, I put the questions.
Nice.
And the answers are in the
Now,
book.
so those are questions you'd gathered from what, new students to ASL?
Right, new students and always first-term students. They'd have certain questions, and as we went along, they'd go, what's this, or why's this?
Throw out a couple example questions here.
When they start reading information and they see little d and big D.
Oh, for little d deaf and big D
Big
deaf.
D deaf. Little d deaf is when you're saying someone is deaf or hard of hearing. Big D deaf means that person aligns with the deaf community, the deaf culture.
The deaf culture is capital D. All right.
Big yes,
D.
capital D, and I don't know why, but we always just call it Big D deaf, and that has to do.
That's part of the
with-
culture.
It's part of the culture. Big D deaf is that we have people that American Sign Language is their primary use. They are proud of their deafness. It's a culture for them. What you see deaf people, you think of like vulnerable in some way because of their deafness. And also people are going like, I don't know deaf people. That's what happens when you have an invisible disability. You don't know if a person's deaf. There could be like 80 deaf people over here in this part of I wouldn't know, unless they were signing. If they were just reading something, I wouldn't know. So these parents haven't seen adults that are deaf. They haven't seen people that, deaf people go to college. Oh, deaf people earn advanced degrees. Oh, deaf people have jobs in this and this and this and this.
That person you see crossing the street or in the in the library or whatever, that you don't know. You just like if you don't interact with them, how? And sometimes
Exactly.
even if you do, right? Because if they're good at lip reading.
Well, that's another thing, and I do talk about lip reading in the book because.
Well, tell us about that. What should we know?
Lip reading is something that is. Some deaf people would say it's a myth. It's kind of like, man, hearing people can lip read better than deaf people. It's like once you have a picture of the whole language, you can lip read,
I see.
But when you are prelingually deaf and you don't really have a strong sense of the language, then lip reading is a real chore. And it's more thought of in the deaf community as like someone has a talent for it. Like if you're just lucky enough to be able to sit down and play the piano, you have a talent for that, you
Right.
know. You can sit down at a piano and do hard work and get pretty good, but there's some people that just have a knack for it. Same thing in the deaf community with lip reading, is that some people just have a knack, they're really good at it. And other people, they have worked all their lives to lip read, and they have a really hard time doing it. And that's why sometimes a person who's deaf that has an understandable voice, they sometimes won't use it. They prefer to use an interpreter or to sign or paper and pencil because one-way communication's not effective. So I can speak, but if I can't hear you, I need an interpreter, because if I have acquired language before I lost my hearing, then my voice is going to be pretty good. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be good at lip reading.
Right. Still a talent.
It's still a talent. So if I speak to someone, then when they speak back to me, I can't understand them. And how can they understand? I can't understand them when I just spoke to them so clearly. So there's a lot of things that I put in the book.
And with that, we'll wrap up and just remind everyone we've been speaking to Bobby Bowman. Her book is Double Take. It is set in Oregon.
Yes.
And it does have a lot of deaf culture in it, and it is educational and exposure to the other people in your community, which is one of the things we like to do at a community radio station. So, Bobby, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm Dave Duncan. This is Willamette Wake Up.